G'day. One of the biggest problems in the world is the lack of agreement as to what different terms mean. Take freedom for example. For many people, freedom means freedom from other people stealing or vandalizing your stuff. While for other people, freedom means freedom to steal and vandalize other people's stuff. This lack of agreement means that when people use this word freedom, they can completely misunderstand what other people mean when they use it. And there's another term that has been bothering me a lot, and I'm going to talk about this. See, after my last video regarding my family being a cult, some people pointed out that my mother still loved me, but in a different way to how I wanted her to. And technically they are correct. But like all things, it's a lot more complicated, and the problem comes back to the meaning of love. And love means very different things to different people. And to give you an example, I always ask people, whenever this topic comes up, what do you mean by love? And everyone has their own definition of what love means. And it's crazy because love is one of those words that people use all the time. And if people have a different meaning, like every person has their own meaning, that means two people can talk about love and they can completely misunderstand each other. Take this for an example. If you loved me, you'd let me eat all of the ice cream by myself. And then someone else says, it's because I love you that I won't let you eat the ice cream yourself. This might seem like a funny example, but I actually agree with both sides of the dilemma. Yes, it is loving to give to others, and yes, it's loving to protect others, or protect others from their bad choices. In fact, I still agree with this even if you go with a more extreme example, like, if you loved me, then you'd give me the money to elope with my drug dealer boyfriend. It's because I love you that I won't give you the money to elope with your drug dealer boyfriend. More extreme example, but I can see both sides being loving. And by the way, I just realized I've gone through my whole preparation for this, and I didn't once point out that for many people, love is actually sexual. Like they say, I love you to make love. There's something sexual to it. And I didn't even think of that while I was doing all my prep work for this. And that's another definition just to add confusion to it. So keep that in the back of your mind too. Anyway, it genuinely baffled me for years trying to understand how love can be both a giving and denying thing at the same time. I mean, who is correct here? How can this thing called love literally drive opposite behaviors? I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I concluded that there are actually two broad types of needs that people have: material needs and spiritual needs. And each of these has relates to the definition of love. Now, sure, both these kind of definitions of love have things in common. They both want to help other people. It's all about helping other people. That's the core of what love is about. Except if it's sexual. Supporting another person's material or spiritual needs are both loving actions. However, they are two distinctly different kinds of love. And that depends on whether you're talking about material needs or spiritual needs, which hopefully should become quite clear. And I've got names for them. I call them maternal love and paternal love. So let's start with the maternal material needs. So material needs focus on feeding and nourishing the body and keeping a person physically safe. This is also known as harm avoidance. Material needs are all about supplying a person with all the survival essentials: food, water, shelter, energy, and security. Now look closely at the word material. Notice how it looks remarkably similar to maternal. Both words derive from the root word mater, meaning mother, as in maternity referring to motherhood. Now, I've read from some authors say that it isn't a coincidence that these words are actually cognate, but I've also read other people say that no, it's a false cognate and they're not actually related to each other. I'm no real expert on the etymology of any particular word, but I'm actually inclined to agree it's probably not a coincidence. So in nature, it's generally the role of the mother to supply all the material needs of the offspring, to provide them with food, usually in the form of milk, and to keep them safe from any harm, especially from misadventure. Thus, giving people resources and protection from harm is maternal love. if you're interested to consider the core aspects of the philosophy of materialism, it could actually be derived as a view of somehow that mother knows best, and that providing another person's material needs is all that really matters, and that spiritual needs are largely irrelevant or actually non-existent altogether. However, that's a whole tangent that you might want to explore yourself. But yeah, so you've got these material needs, and these are about supplying the basic physical needs that you need to survive. But man cannot live on bread alone. He also has needs that are beyond the physical, and he has spiritual needs. And this is what I call paternal love, or, dare I invent my own word, paternal needs. Anyway, what are spiritual needs? So, every conscious being has their own unique forms of spiritual needs. A dog needs a pack to belong to. A cat needs a territory to claim as their own, and a bird needs to learn how to fly. Now, human beings are the most spiritual animals on earth, and thus our spiritual needs are greater and more complicated than any other animals. There are so many spiritual needs for people. I won't do them justice here, but I'll just cover some of the core ones. A human child needs attention. They need acceptance. They need affection. They need empathy. They need patience. They need conversation. They need entertainment. They need intellectual stimulation. They need a tribe to belong to. They need loyalty from the members of that tribe. They need friendship. They need companionship. They need education, and very importantly, they also need to be challenged. Now, women are uniquely equipped to better provide material needs. By that I mean they have boobs. And smaller feet so they can reach the dishes in the sink more easily. Oh, okay, I'm joking. But you get what I mean. They are better equipped for the material needs because they're also very good at fine motor work, very good at organizing and networking and task switching and spotting dangers like, it's a spider! Definitely in the female domain to be better at those things. But men are better equipped to provide spiritual needs. Children need a mother to make sure all their material needs are met, and they need a father to make sure all their spiritual or material needs are met. So my mother, she always made sure that there was food on the table. She made sure I had a roof over my head, and she made sure my medical issues were dealt with, and she made sure I was physically safe. And if I was desperate for money, she would give me some money. In that sense, my mother was loving. She was loving in the maternal or material sense. However, interactions with my mother are just always disappointing for me because she generally wouldn't even be listening to me. She would forget things that we talked about previously, and like she did this in her 40s, not just in her 60s and 70s. Or she'd start telling me off if something I said she didn't like, and that's not acceptance. Like, she wouldn't accept me for who I was. And she would generally steer the conversation to be about her and about her problems and her feelings, her interests, and what she wanted, and she wouldn't even notice that she was doing this. On several occasions, she told me bluntly that I owed her for existing, and that she had the right to mold me into whoever she wanted me to be. As a consequence, I didn't have any kind of spiritual connection with my mother since the age of 9. I learnt not to trust her with anything personal after a very distressing incident involving a bird that I rescued in the garden. I might just go on a little bit of a tangent there. So, when I was 9, I rescued a little bird. He had obviously fallen out of a nest, and I found him on the ground, and I took him in, and I fed him honey and mints, and I called him Fluffy. And Fluffy became quite imprinted on me, and would just follow me around. And turned out, as Fluffy barely had any feathers when I found him, but quickly turned into a sparrow, a very common sparrow. Now, my mother didn't like me having, quote, a wild animal in the house, and didn't like that fact that I had adopted this bird and I was looking after this bird, and the bird was my pet. And she'd just keep nagging me, no, gotta put it outside, it belongs in the wild, it should be wild. And I tried very hard to try and teach the bird to fly. Like, I actually learnt about, oh yeah, birds have to learn to fly. They have to teach other birds to fly. They kind of lure them with food, or they nudge them to fall off a branch. So they forced to actually learn to fly. And I tried that. I tried to teach Fluffy to fly, but Fluffy never quite learned how to fly. And my mother just kept nagging and nagging, like, oh, it's a wild animal. I don't want that diseased thing in the house. It's dirty. It's terrible. Blah blah. It's not healthy. And eventually I caved in. Like, as a 9-year-old, I caved in. You know, mother knows best. And my Fluffy, I found Fluffy in pieces the next day, just torn to shreds by my dog. After I, let it out. And I was just, I was absolutely gutted. And I never trusted my mother again. I just could not trust her again after that. And like, I just remember that she just nagged me and nagged me and nagged me to do this, but it's what she wanted, because she didn't feel comfortable with it. She didn't care about me or how I felt about it. That was non-existent. That was a non-issue to her. It was only about her needs and what she wanted. And didn't really care about the spiritual impact it would have on me, like how I wouldn't trust, I'd disconnect emotionally from her. And that's what actually happened. As a consequence, she knows nothing about my relationships, my work, my interests, my talents, my relationships. In fact, she probably doesn't even know my favorite color of food. I've just compartmentalized from the age of 9. I will never open up. I'll never trust and feel emotionally safe with my mother again because of what she did and how she pushed me at 9 when I was in a very vulnerable position. So my spiritual relationship there is kind of non-existent. I'm literally a stranger to my family. They've got no idea what I'm like, what goes through my mind, and what I care about. It's really quite sad. But yeah, a mother like mine is typically described as being a narcissistic mother. And I find a lot of people can actually relate to this kind of mother. She will meet all of their material needs, but starve her children to death spiritually, often jealously blocking their father from taking an active interest in her own children's lives, or choosing a father for their children with very poor spiritual acumen, possibly because the mother's father was not a significant part of her life, or out of jealousy that her children might have a better relationship with their father than they will with her, since it is the traditional role of the father to nurture the spiritual side of a child to make them ready to handle the world outside the home. Now, in the case of my mother, she chose a man who was a terrible, terrible specimen of fatherhood. Firstly, he didn't even want to have kids. He was a player and he was moving up in his career, and she accidentally got pregnant. Now, after a shotgun wedding, he never actually embraced or accepted being a father. He read lots of books, but he never read a book about parenting or being a father once that I know of. Likewise, my mother never read, she read books by the dozens too, and she didn't bother reading any books about relationships or alcoholism or addiction or self-help or psychology or family or anything like that might have helped her situation. Both my parents saw themselves as victims, as helpless, victims of their children and their circumstances, and neither stepped up to the plate to do any serious adult self-work to try and improve the situation. Like, yeah, the mistakes were made, but everything can be improved, and they never put the energy into improve because they never imagined they could see themselves as improving. Now, and their parenting consequently was just solely focused on the material needs of their children. And so both are very narrow-minded and weak people, very spiritually weak people. They both could have benefited from having a strong paternal influence in their lives to meet their spiritual needs, and as far as I know with both my parents, they didn't really actually have a strong positive paternal influence in their lives. In fact, all of European civilization, I'm willing to wager, is dangerously imbalanced in favor of the material over the spiritual, over the maternal over the paternal. The role of the mother as parent has displaced the traditional role of the father and is endangering all of us in a profound spiritual way. So let's go over some of these needs again and talk about how and why fathers are often better able to provide these spiritual needs to their children. So a child needs attention. They need someone to spend quality time with them. Women tend to be task switchers and task jugglers, and that's wonderful, that's great. But consider how men tend to prefer to focus all their attention at the problem at hand and or the person at hand. And women know how focused a man can be when he wants to get something done, and they know how focused he can be on a woman that he likes. He can also focus all his attention on his children too, and when he needs to, in a way that no one else in the world can match. Regarding affection, it's no accident men write romantic poems for women. It's kind of a way of saying, look, I can be really affectionate. I can be really affectionate to your children, or our children. That there's warmth in his heart. I mean, that's why men write poems. I mean, it's not really for the woman's benefit. Oh, well, yeah, you know, it's not directly. And when it comes to entertainment, well, I think we all know deep down who the funniest sex really is. And intellectual stimulation, men are always fixing things, solving problems, just exploring. And this means they have no shortage of interesting topics and adventures to share with their children and to expand their children's horizons and imagination. This is why a lot of men are storytellers. And also why women spend a lot of time listening to men. I mean, men are pretty interesting and creative, naturally, which seems to be what nature's direction, that men are quite active and adventurous and like to share and talk about what they learn. Now, men also naturally form teams in sport and recreation with others, like, you know, team sports. And for men, being part of a tribe is very important. Working together to build up and strengthen that tribe is important to them. The loyalty to the tribe is very important to them. While for women, it's the family that's more important. Loyalty to your mates is something you'll hear men champion a lot more than you will from women. Companionship means so much to men that in circumstances where the wife dies before the husband, most men will lose the will to live after their wife has died and will die shortly after them. While no such statistical increase in mortality is found with women whose husband has died before them. Last of all, and certainly not least, it is men who encourage people through challenges. They push their children to train, to test themselves, to expand their horizons, to be brave and to discover their limits. Mothers worry about their children getting hurt, while fathers worry about their children being weak and unable to weather the storms in the world beyond the hearth. It is men who say, I won't make it easy for you because I love you. I am deliberately making this challenging for you because I want you to be strong and independent. I want you to be more than just a well-nourished and protected grub in a cocoon. I push you hard because I want to see you take flight and soar like the butterfly you are. Now, of course, I've described an ideal. Few men live up to these things, but as a whole, men are naturally inclined far more than women to foster the spiritual growth of others. And this is widely talked about by our ancestors all the time, before political correctness. Women provide the material needs, while fathers are the spiritual parent guiding and directing their families, their tribes, and their nations in all areas where leadership is required. And I know a lot of people are going to be challenged by me saying this. And that's good, because consider that I'm a man, it's my place to challenge, and I'm challenging you, and I like doing it. It comes very naturally to me to challenge. Challenging other people does not come naturally to women. It's something they have to learn, and they take inspiration. But for men, it's like, challenge, conflict, I want it, I will take it on. And when men take on a challenge, when I take on a challenge, I can tell you personally, I really feel invigorated for it. I feel really like charged and excited to challenge other people, to challenge their beliefs, because it's my way of saying, I want you to be stronger. I want you to be better. I want you to be happier and to achieve the best you can. And the only way for me to do that, the best way for me to do that is to challenge you, to make you stronger. And right now, I'm challenging you to rethink your ideas on love. And until next time, Prospera ad Astra.